Come on in, come on in. Well, if you're visiting or you're new, my name is Matt. I get the joy of being the priest in this beautiful community. And we at Unlimited, we're this gorgeous community that want to do two things really well. We're going to be a multi-generational that goes all out for our unreached youth in the city. I'm going to talk about that today. This is what I'm going to kind of expand a little bit today. And the second thing is we want to be the miracle people. We want to be the people in the middle of the city where when someone says, hey, I've got this thing going on, we're like, oh yeah, I know someone who can help with that. Yeah, we want to be the people in the middle of the city where people kind of flock in because they're like, I've heard about this God who does this. You know, I've heard about this God who heals that. I've heard about this God who restores and redeems and loves and cares. And so we want to be this beautiful, multi-generational family going all out for our unreached youth and seeing miracles everywhere. This talk, I hope some of you have heard before, and I hope that you'll hear it again. I want to deliver this talk every 9 months or so. It's not a normal Unlimited talk. It's a bit more thematic. Normally, we're going to go through, actually going through the Prodigal Son. We're going to spend 5 weeks in the Prodigal Son. Normally, we take a Bible book and we go through it, but every now and again, we break in with a little bit of vision. So I hope that you've heard it, and I hope that you'll hear it again. And we're going to dive into Revelation 21. And it says something like this. This is John speaking. Then I heard a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw a holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne say, look, God's dwelling place is now amongst the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He'll wipe every tear from their eye. There'll be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order has passed away. He who is seated on the throne said, I am making all things new. Then he said, write down these words, for they are trustworthy and true. You know, one of the things that we've been really trying to do over the last 18 months since we've been here is to kind of move us into a new season, not necessarily internally, but externally. Before I joined Unlimited, we were kind of pigeonholed as the youth church in the city, and actually I don't think that's quite fair. We are a multi-generational family going all out for the unreached youth of the city. There is a difference. We're not just existing purely for the benefit of youth. We are existing to be a family. A space where you can come and you can join and you can be plugged in and you can be loved and you can be cared for, not just by one demographic, but by a whole host. And we want to be this family that goes all out for our unreached youth. And the real answer is why. And it's quite simple. You'll hear me say this every single week at church probably. 86% of people in the church join before the age of 25. 86%. One of the reasons why we got this job was I emailed our old bishop and said, you know, one liner, shall we put 86% of our budget towards young people? ? The answer was no. But that's when this conversation started. You know, it's interesting. Our friends at Youth Alpha, they say that about 3% of people between the ages of 16 and 24 are church people, are people who follow Jesus. Just 3%. If that number drops by 0.3 to 2.7, there will be an unreached people group. An unreached people group. And I want to say, not on our watch. Not on our watch. These young people have so much to offer. They're bringing life and beauty to our city. They bring passion. They are gorgeously made. And I really believe that the Lord is doing something beautiful amongst them. I really believe that God is raising up leaders who will change the church in a really gorgeous way. And therefore, we will do absolutely everything possible to go all out for our unreached youth in the city. 12,000 college students. So at the beginning, I'm not quite sure how many uni students. Last year was 24,000. We have got so many. We want to love them. We want to care for them. You know, the youth, the grads, the students who find themselves in this city. I vividly remember the day that I was thrown out of church. Anyone been there? No, just me, just the vicar, sure. I remember my mum and dad are sitting on the back, and I remember the day that I sat there with my mum and dad in our front room, and I was sat in the middle, and my dad was here, my mum was here, and there was this bloke from church who came. I'm trying to get an ADHD diagnosis. I was a fairly disruptive teenager. It's probably the fairest way to say it. And I remember the day that they said, look, Matt, we've risk assessed you, and you are too much trouble. You break too many things. You're too aggressive. You have too many fights. Like you've smashed up the church too many times. You've kicked too many kicked through too many windows. You've sworn at us. I was like, really? You know, like out of all the things you could say. And I remember the day they said, like, Matt, we have risk assessed you, and you can't come back anymore. And I remember both the deep shame and the kind of jubilation at the same time. I remember the day I was thinking, like, I felt immensely embarrassed. Like I was, you know, like it was quite painful for my parents. I'm sorry for that, Mum and Dad. But at the same time, I kind of thought, like, absolute win. Don't have to go anymore. You know, like I was like, if I'd known that was the consequence, I would have done that earlier. You know, like if that had been the case, you know, like I remember sitting in the front room thinking, like, I kind of like my friends at church, but church is just a load of nonsense. And I remember sitting there thinking, like, what is going on? And you know, like, thank goodness I had some amazing friends that carried me through. Thank goodness I had a loving family. Thank goodness that I had some people that would keep me on the straight and narrow. But I had this really rocky relationship with church as a teenager, where I'd kind of go back for a few months, and then they would kick me out again, and then they would realize they needed me to play drums in the band, so they would welcome me back in. And then, you know, a few months would go by, and I would do something or say something, or, you know, like turn up for something, they'd say, no, Matt, too much again. And I had this ongoing relationship with church, which was like, I go for a little bit, I get thrown out, go for a little bit, wasn't for me. And I had these amazing friends that just kept me through. But this really rough relationship until when I was about 16, I was from southeast London, Kent, it's a beautiful place. But I got into this wrong group of friends that were doing all sorts of stuff, and it was a bit messy. And long story short, we came down to North Devon as part of like a revision group. I don't know if any of you did like revision clubs. This was like a revision club on steroids. It was beautiful. We revised in the morning, or at least I pretended to revise in the morning, and then we surfed in the afternoon. You guys probably did actually revise because you came to Exeter University, right? But like we surfed in the afternoon, or we climbed in the afternoon, or we got out in the fresh air in the afternoon. I remember like, all week they were like, I know, Matt, you feel like church has given up on you, but God has. And I'd be like, get out of my face. Someone would say, like, Matt, God doesn't give up. I'd be like, you are so sus, just get out of my face. Like, God doesn't, I was like, and eventually got to the end of the week, and someone who I really respected, they probably sent him, said to me, hey, Matt, you know, like, God hasn't given up on you. And I said to him, like, cool story, bro, get out of my face. And I remember him saying to me, if you don't believe me, why don't you ask him for yourself? And I was like, I just want to go surfing. And you're trying to talk to me about God. And he was like, we're not going to go surfing for another 10 minutes. And I remember saying to him quite vividly, like, okay, I will ask your imaginary God if he exists. Sure thing, if it shuts you up. And I remember sitting on the rocks in this beautiful beach called Woolacombe, North Devon. It's like one of my favourite places in the world. And I sat there on these rocks and said, okay, God, if you're real, come show yourself to me. And I just sensed this wave of love, of care. Just felt this, like, just the Holy Spirit wash over me. And I'd kind of experienced that as a younger teenager, but not in the same way. And everything was different. Everything was different. You know, you contrast this to another experience I had as a slightly older kind of grad, where I joined a church called Holy Trinity Brompton, HTB. And I joined there having gone to music school, failed that. Tried to be a drummer, failed that. I joined a Christian speaker, he'd be a bag carrier for him. We differed on theology. He sacked me at the end of the year. You know, and so therefore, HTB picked me up, this church in London picked me up. And I remember going there really nervous on my first day. And I had this amazing boss who was an ex-major in the army. We used to call him Major Miles. He was amazing. And he was just incredible. And after about a year of working there, they said, hey, Matt, will you take on a Connect group? And I said, no. I've never done anything successful in my life. I can't take this on. They said, no, go on. And it flourished. It was Laura and I. We weren't dating at that point. But we kind of like, we just took on this group and it flourished. And they would say, hey, what do you need? Do you need someone to cook for you? Do you need someone to come lead worship? Do you need to come on someone to preach? Do you want some more pastoral skills? Do you need some organization? Like, what do you need? What can we provide? How can we make this grow? How can we make this flourish even more? You know, if you dig into my why, that latter experience is exactly why we do what we do. You know, that experience as a teenager changes everything for me. I never want anybody in the city to believe, to walk another day thinking that God is against them, that church is not for them. That this space can't be a holy space in the middle of the city where they can encounter a living God who loves them and is for them. If you drill into our why, we want to play our part in revitalizing the church, particularly with the rising generations. I was, sat in the coffee trailer this week and had this beautiful conversation with this young person who said, hey, Christians have told me these horrible things have happened to me. Hey, I've tried church and just isn't for me. Hey, I've heard about your God and this is what someone told me about them. And we got to unpack this beautiful life of love and care. I got to say to her, I think you were made for a reason and a purpose. I think that you were made to be loved and to love God. And we had this amazing kind of moment. Like, that is what we live for, isn't it? Being able to gently, honestly share, hey, this is who God really is. This is his love for you. This is where he's leading us. And so I want us just to break out. At Unlimited, I don't really believe in monologues. I believe in dialogue. And so I want to just to slightly destroy our nice, neat rows. Is that okay? I wonder whether we can jump up again and maybe interact with someone that you met in the family time bit. But I'd love you to find somebody, perhaps, who's a different generation to you. If you're over 25, find someone who's under 25. Someone who's under 25, find someone who's over 25. And I want you to basically ask these kind of questions. If you're over 25, find someone who's under 25 and ask them about the struggles, the hopes, the dreams, the desires that they have for the world upon which they live. Like, how does it really work for them? What does it feel like to be in their shoes? And then if you're over 25, I want you to kind of ask the question, what can we actively do to support you? Is that okay? Can you jump up? Could you maybe find someone who you don't know that well or someone who's new and just introduce yourself, and then we're going to go from there. Anyone learn anything new about each other? Yeah, I love it. People smiling and nodding, which is good. I want to look at the grand narrative of the scriptures. Like, what is the point? Like, what is God doing? And I think it can be summarized in one phrase: the renewal of all things. Let's rewind the clock a little bit. Out of nothing, God creates. He speaks and there is light. He speaks and there is land. He speaks and there is, like fish in the sea. He speaks and there is vegetation. And he speaks and says, let there be human beings. He sets into motion a world that is set perfectly for the environment upon which humans will flourish. Human flourishing, is like the most beautiful moment in this scene, the Garden of Eden, upon which he makes humanity, where they live in paradise, where there's no striving or hustle or pain or, injuries or cancer or loneliness or suffering. And Adam and Eve, they kind of enter the scene, don't they? And Eve and Adam, they're getting on pretty well. And they've got a few kids, and life is good. And Adam says, I want apple crumble. I want apple crumble. Eve makes some apple crumble, doesn't she? She enters the garden, and she finds the apples. And the devil, in the form of a snake, comes along, doesn't he? And says, hey. Those apples are good, but those apples... they're the ones you want, right? They're the one they are the best apples you're ever going to taste. They're gorgeous and they're succulent, and they would be in the M&S advert, right? They are the ones that you want. And she said, whoa, but God said we can have any fruit but that one tree. And the devil says this lie that he tells us every day. Why would God keep something good back from you? Like, if it's so good, why would God say you can't go there? Like, if it's so delicious and so good and so satisfying, and why would he restrict that? Surely he'd want you to enjoy that. We get told the same lie every day, don't we? And Eve, she grabs the apple and they take a bite and they realize what they have done. They become spiritually sick. They realize that they're naked and they're banished from the garden, aren't they? They hide from God, and God says, this is not working as it should. And so they enter a world where it's not paradise, but it's a land of thorns and a distinct lack of peace and spiritual darkness. Yes, God doesn't leave us in that state, does he? He says, no, I'll do something about it. I have a plan from the word go. He sends his one and only son, his son whom he loves, into the world to be brutally murdered, to pay our punishment for our bad debt. Not on merit, but on faith. And therefore, as God comes back to judge the living and the dead, we look at that moment and we think, oh, judgment, don't want to go there. Oh, we're 2024, dude. Dangerous territory. But this is the most beautiful thing, because the promise of God is that he will destroy evil. He'll destroy suffering. He'll destroy the things that cause us to be sick. God's promise is that he's coming back to judge the world in order to renew the world, to bring it back into its fullness of life, to bring it back to an Eden-like state. And that we may live with him not based on the good things that we've done, but based purely on faith. It's interesting, Martin Luther, one of the great reformers, someone asked him, hey Martin, like, what would you do if you knew Jesus was coming back? Like, what's the first thing that you would do? And if Jesus is coming back tomorrow morning, like 9 a.m., what are you going to do tonight? And he says, hey, I guess the answer is probably like you'd expect, like, I'm going to go home and make love to my wife, or I'm going to go home and spend some time with my kids, or I'm going to go on vacation, short little trip to Paris, it's going to be beautiful. He doesn't, does he? He says this, if Jesus was coming back tomorrow, I'd plant a tree. And everyone's like, what are you on about, Martin? And he said, yeah, because if I planted that tree, it would be the most beautiful thing the next day. When Jesus comes back, the blossom on it would be gorgeous. The fruit would be so delicious. It would be the most gorgeous thing we have ever experienced. Why is this so important? This narrative of the renewal of all things. Why would I, frankly, spend so much time in my talk talking about the youth of the city, talking about it? Because this is the framework upon which we hang everything. This is the framework upon what we are wanting to see, what we are praying in, what we pray God will do in our city. This changes everything. This is so powerful when it comes to youth culture. And thankfully, in Exeter, we live perhaps in the safest city in the whole world. Like we're talking about this morning with some of the freshers. It is like the most safe city. Like about a year ago, I left my car key and my wallet on my wall overnight. Nothing happened. It was there the next morning. Like you wouldn't get that back home, like it is the safest city in the whole world. But it doesn't feel always that way mentally for some of our young people. Some of our young people, it's the hardest place to be. It's a real daily battle. Bernardo's, about a year ago, they stated practitioners have raised concern about cuts to key support services, rising levels of poverty, financial instability, and widening inequality. I love that we host the group for the kids who are care experienced in this space. Like life was hard as a teenager. You had to kind of work out the social norms. You had to work out how to interact. You had to navigate the bullying. You had to work out what it was to be part of a team and not to be part of a team. You had to work out what it was like to do life. But I tell you what, I never worried about financial instability or inequality or poverty. The Church Times, they ran an article about a year ago, June last year, and they stated of the people that they surveyed, just 15% of them, of the young people, were optimistic about the future. Just 15% of young people are optimistic about the future. It's never been harder to be a young person. I'd love to see the stat for the boomers or the millennials. I was with, my year at school was like 250 boys. I reckon there was 249 positive people about their future. Like this has never been the case for our young people. It's never been so hard, and it's so backwards. If young people knew the joy that God wants to bring them despite facing the harshest of situations, despite growing up in the hardest of times, it would change everything. Imagine what it would mean for a young person to discover that God loves them so much that he would leave heaven in order to come down to earth to die by barbaric death, to be reconciled with them back to God. Or his plan to destroy evil and renew the earth. This changes everything to a place where only his goodness will prevail. Or a God who creates the universe and is so wanting to get involved in the lives of you and I that he'd become a human being in order to bring us perfect peace. One of our friends, a guy called Sean Hornsby, you might know him, he was at Rediscover last year. He's just become he's quite a senior staff member at Youth for Christ. I was texting him this week saying, Sean, give me some stats for this talk, as all good preachers do. And he said this, he said, the bad news is this: 92% of people in this nation, of young people in this nation, have a negative or indifferent opinion to church. 92% of young people in this nation have a negative or an indifferent opinion of the church. He said the good news is, though, 36% of all young people want someone to speak to them about their faith. 36% of all young people want someone to speak to them about their faith. And of those 36, 51% of young people want to know more about Jesus when someone talks to them about him. Just 51% of people who Jesus is explained to them want to know more about who he is. This is so beautiful. We have the ultimate security that we can offer a generation that it feels so brutal to live in. Jesus, I think, is saying over these young people, he'll wipe every tear from their eye. There'll be no more death or mourning. The old order has passed away. Or you come back to Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 11, where Jesus, it says, Isaiah says about Jesus, when Jesus comes back, the wolf will lie down with the lamb, and the leopard will lie down with the goat, and the calf with the lion, and the yearling together. And the little child will lead them. The cow will feed the bear, and their young will lie down together. The lion will eat straw like the ox, and the infant will play near the cobra's den. The young will put their hand in the viper's nest. They will neither harm nor destroy on my holy mountain, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord. This is what God is wanting to do. God is wanting to raise up a group of people who know about his perfect peace, who know about his love, who know about his care, who want to see the work of God in their day-to-day lives. It's so contrast to the world that they live. In a world that demands more and more and more and more and more, Jesus' heart is not to hustle but to renew. In a culture that becomes more brutal and more draining, as we get mentally drained staring at our screens, as we get kind of physically drained by the stuff that we have to do, and socially drained with people around us, Jesus is there gently declaring, this is never meant to be the plan. I've got something far more beautiful, far more satisfactory, something far more gorgeous for your soul. Come back to some more stats. The Prince's Trust, they've helped about 1 million people today. What I found staggering about their research is they said this: 63% of young people say they are scared for the future. 56% say they always or often feel anxious. 62% of people say they often or always feel stressed. Our young people have so much to offer. They are a gift, not just to this church, but the church. I really believe that the harvest has never been riper. And conversations about faith are so intriguing. You might have heard me talk about a young person that I met at the coffee trader about a year ago who came up to me and said, "Hey, Matt, can we have a conversation?" I said, "Hey, just before we start, I'm a priest, and my views are fairly old school. We're probably going to disagree here." And he said, "No, that's exactly why I've come to find you." I said, "Cole, tell me more." He said, "I'm so bored of the truth being fluid. I'm looking for something stable. I'm looking for something that I can put my feet on that is secure." Our young people are searching for truth, wanting firm foundations, and we have the answers. And part of our vision, like they're trying to do as a church, is to love God and become more like Jesus. Well, what does Jesus do? Jesus hands over the keys to the kingdom, not to well-established people, not to people who have been through Bible school and have got all the answers, not to people that are highly respected. No, he hands them over to a group of young people and says, "Over to you. Run with this. Go ahead and change the world." I am so convinced that Jesus is wanting and waiting to speak into the lives of young people into this city, particularly our younger generations, more than ever before. I've never been more convinced that there is a need for people to know the grand narrative of the remaking of all things and to carry that into their workplaces, carry that into their social spheres, carry that into their families, carry that into the places that their feet find themselves. It's interesting, Gordon Fee, brilliant theologian, he said this: God is not simply saving a diverse individuals and preparing them for heaven. Rather, he is creating a people for his name among whom God can dwell. Who God can dwell in their life together, and they'll reproduce God's life and his character in all its unity and diversity. I think that God is looking upon us and saying, who are you going to hand this on to? Who are you going to raise up? Who are you going to love? Who are you going to mentor? Who are you going to speak to? Who are you going to enable yourself to have hard conversations with? Like, where am I going to squeeze into the gaps of your busyness? We get to play our part in reproducing God's life and his character in order that the church, literally tomorrow, not 10 years down the road, literally tomorrow, will be changed and challenged and flourish. Coming back to Sean, that's where I kind of want to kind of conclude. Sean concluded the text by saying, national research revealed there are 3 areas that the local church has found to have the greatest struggle in engaging with young people. Firstly, in a lack of volunteers. Secondly, in a lack of resources. And thirdly, finding a lack of confidence in sharing about who Jesus is. I don't necessarily believe that is the case for us. I would love every single person in this room to get involved in loving, shaping, sharing who Jesus is to young people. I think everybody has a part to play in helping steer the ship to being a multi-generational family going all out for unreached young people. Lack of resources, well, that's certainly us. We're facing a budget deficit this year. If you're able to give resources, time, energy, money, please get involved. And a lack of confidence. And it's interesting, this last point, isn't it? Because the only way that we become more confident is by having a go. Is by trying. It is by stepping out and saying, God, I'm going to go there. I'm going to go there, like, I'm trusting you to pull through on this one. And so can I ask that you become bolder in this season? And you say, Lord, what are you up to? Where are you going? Where are you moving? Whether you are in that 16 or 14 to 24-year-old bubble, or whether you're slightly older, can I challenge you to be bolder in saying, God, what are you up to? Allow this voice of the Spirit to breathe life into your days, to see him at work. So to use a Christian term, and this really is my kind of conclusion, we get to be the body of Christ. We get to be the people who God chooses to use in this space. God never intended it to be on the shoulders of a single leader, but he invests himself in communities so that we as a community, a family, a genuine family, can go all out to see young people in this city changed and loved and cared for, and to see them being part of the renewal of all things. Remind what John says. I see a new heaven and a new earth. For the first earth and the first heaven has passed away, and there'll be no longer any seas. I saw a holy city, a new Jerusalem, coming down from heaven, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, look, God's dwelling place is where? Amongst his people. Please leave this space loving God, becoming more like Jesus, and sharing him with the world around you. That's what I desperately want us to be. And I cannot wait to see what God is doing over this next year.